The answer to this question has been a long time coming because this is a reply to the video that I made about an Egypt News about this Karnak Kings list being restored, and then this is the actual photo I got to take when I saw it almost a year ago. But we talked about in our last video about what is a king's list and some of the examples of it. So let's talk about why some pharaohs are not included in king's lists. The simpler reason is that some kings lists are only recording a small time period and only are recording some of the pharaohs. And also, when you think about it, the kings list is only going to include the pharaohs from previous times. So if we're talking about like the Den cylinder seal kings list, which is coming from pre-dynastic Egypt, there's very little pharaohs to include, or one of maybe the Old Kingdom or Middle Kingdom kings list. They're not going to be able to include a lot of pharaohs. But the other thing is that there are ones that include a ton, and it attempts to try to do every single pharaoh from before when it was made, but then they deliberately don't include some people. So let's talk about that specifically. So this is the Turin Kings list, and as I said in the last video, it's made out of papyrus. It's unfortunately pretty damaged, but we have been able to determine that it includes 223 kings, which is astounding, and it is by far the kings list that has the most or attempts to record the most pharaohs as possible. It comes from the 19th dynasty, so obviously it's not going to include anything after the 19th dynasty, but there are quite a lot of pharaohs that are not included on these kings lists, even those coming from the later New Kingdom. And some of them, it's pretty hard to be able to determine why they are not including them. And it's going to be even harder for you to understand when I tell you their names and you're going to say to me, Melissa, but those are the most famous or most recognizable ancient Egyptian pharaohs. And I'm going to say, I know. That's why it's ironic. The most common pharaohs that are not going to be included in King's List are going to be Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, King Tutankhamun, and Pharaoh I. Now, these four pharaohs come from two different parts of the 18th dynasty and are often not included in King's List because they didn't necessarily follow the ancient Egyptian norm. Hatshepsut's might be a little bit more personal because it was happening at pretty much the behest of her stepson/nephew, who she sort of slightly usurped the throne from. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and I are a whole nother story, and I'm going to make a separate video about those three. So besides like the more personal grievances of why some people are not included, it truly just has to depend on the time period. So the Abydos king list of Seti I does not really include any of the kings from the first intermediate period, and it doesn't really include any of the kings of the second intermediate period. Why? We can't really say for sure, but it could be a mix of lost records or even not seeing that these pharaohs are fit to be included because in certain time periods, they were actually two pharaohs ruling at the same time over different parts of Egypt, and maybe they're only considering the ones that were ruling over a unified Egypt. In addition, the Saqqara tablet has kings from the 19th dynasty and on, but they don't really include many from the first dynasty. Might be because of a loss of records, might be because they just don't really care about that. That's that old. As I mentioned, the Turin Kings List is the most complete Kings List, even though it is obviously severely damaged, and we believe that approximately 50% of the papyrus is missing. So let me know if you want me to go over each of these Kings Lists and talk a little bit more in detail about who's included and who's not.